All right, we're going to glue this together. Now, something we do before every time we glue together, two things actually. Number one is assemble it dry. A dry assembly will highlight whether there are any areas of the joints that still need to be trimmed. Because basically if you see any gaps, there's usually a reason. It's usually a bump somewhere else that's causing the gap in the other place. Because if you've got a bump here, the wood will only go in as far as the bump is, and then the gap will be left in the other spot. So just inspect it first and see that it fits together nice and tight without any gaps. And if there are big gaps, you really should try and see whether you can trim down the shoulders, and you probably need to ask your teacher, myself, about that. Second thing we always do is question, is there anything that's going to be easier to sand now than it is later? And in this case, we don't really want to sand the inside of the box later. So before we do any of the glue up, we'll just open it out like this on the bench, all four pieces together, and we'll use some sandpaper just to sand it on the inside. Now, it's not going to be super rough. You haven't cut it or done anything bad with it, but there'll just be some marks inside there, which I've just gone straight to a 180 grit. So that's a fairly fine sandpaper. It just means later on we'll be able to have it sanded right into the corners, which will be much nicer. Now, the other thing we should probably keep in mind with this is that there will be an inner box on this design. And so what that means is that a lot of these inside surfaces won't really get seen too much. Perhaps around the lid they will, but around the bottom of the box they won't really even get seen because we've got that inside box going inside this. So you just need to give it a quick sand, particularly up near the lid area, because that's the area which will be seen the most. So now we've done that. The glue up can happen. We're going to need a number of clamps here. Basically every joint needs to be clamped together, and the glue up for this sort of stuff can be quite time consuming because we've got really, sorry I'm not on the camera, I'm getting my glue bottle. Every corner has lots and lots of little zigzaggy little joins in it, which has to have glue in every one of those. You can't just like put a bit of glue here or there and hope for the best. Every joint has to really have a blob of glue in there. So that's all three of these ones. And then it needs to be smeared up the sides on both sides of that joint. And ideally, a little bit of glue just on the inside face. Now we need a gluing stick for this. I'm actually using my putty stick at the moment, which it's a little bit big. But really the recommendation for me, for you to glue this up is to have a gluing stick. Now, if you don't have a gluing stick, you need to make one. So let me show you how to make a gluing stick very quickly. We use the offcuts off the tongue and groove. The best thing to use is a bit of probably basically the tongue that came off of the tongue and groove, because the tongue is only about, I think it's about 4 millimeters wide, which means it's got a little surface on it. So basically all you've got to do is sand it. So you've got like a little screwdriver, a flat-headed tool. You can just make the other end comfortable, and so you end up with just a tiny little thing like this. Sorry, you weren't even watching the sander there, but basically like a little, a little screwdriver sort of a bit. If it's too pointy, it'll wear out because it'll be too thin, and if it's too thick, it'll be a bit chunky and a bit hard to use. But just a little tiny screwdriver thing like that, called a gluing stick. Every woodwork student should have one in their pocket along with their putty stick. So back to the gluing. This is going to take a little while, and so I'm probably just going to stop the video and then restart it again, but I'll just show you one or two more. So that's a little dab of glue into each of these. Use your little glue stick to smear it up the sides. So there should be 3 inner surfaces there on each one that's being glued. And then you also ask yourself which surface is inside the box, because basically these little pins also just on the inside of the box should have a tiny little blob on as well. So talking about just there on the inside. So that's the first piece. The second piece, we just need to work our way around here. This is a left, so it's only got, like we don't glue that big long section at the bottom there because that's for the slider. Just come later, that'll be dealt with. So just glue it up the sides and then a little bit on the fingers of the inside surface. Do the same over here. So really this glue up is probably going to take you at least 5 minutes to get the glue on if you have a gluing stick. If you don't have a gluing stick, your fingers are going to be way too fat to fit inside the joints. You know, there's no way you're going to get glue in there like that unless you've got a gluing stick. So just make sure you do have your gluing stick and you're not just being slack with this, because if you want this project to last for the next 20 years, then you need to make sure that this gluing is done properly, because it's the glue that holds the joint strong. Like, yes, the finger joints are kind of holding it in place there, but it's actually the glue which will dry and make it strong. Now, I will just pause this and I'll come back at the end of it when I've got it glued up.